on episode 5 of Empire Mentality, and my guest today takes us through his life of growing up on a farm, being that kid in that small town where everyone knew his name. That led to a lot of successes throughout his early life and early career. But he admits that there was some point along the way that he lost himself and he had to find himself again. So he takes us through the steps that he took to find himself, to be happier with himself, through self-exploration and getting help from others. We also touch on how he approaches building teams and working with others, because he is the executive vice president at Michigan Sugar Company, but he also happens to be my dad. So we talk about some philosophies that he lives by, some words that he lives by and has taught me throughout the years. And he opened up about some things that I didn't even know about him and that others can learn from. So I'm excited for people to listen, so let's get into it. It is episode 5 with my dad, and this is Empire Mentality. So we're sitting here at the lake, at you and Mom's lake house, looking at this gorgeous view. And I think it would be interesting to dive into kind of your path into this symbolic success, this house as a symbol of success, I guess, for a young farm kid growing up in the middle of nowhere, kind of, and then moving on to the work life, career life, and not starting. A lot of people that we've had on the past have started their own businesses, but you're a little different. You've had a little different path of kind of the same path as maybe most people, getting a job out of college and just working your way up through a company. So you want to start with kind of your childhood and growing up on a farm and kind of just going from there, and then we'll get into career stuff later on.
Yeah, let's do that. First of all, thanks for having me, and congratulations on Empire Mentality. I'm proud of you for that. If one asks me about my childhood, I would best summarize it as one that gave me strength and structure. Growing up on a farm, I lived on a dirt road. For the longest time, I think we were the only house on that dirt road for at least a mile. Grew up with 6 kids in our family. My father was a construction worker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for the beginning, and then started her own business later in life. But as I look at my childhood, it was one with a lot of structure. Staunch Catholic family. Never missed a Sunday of church. Never missed a holy day of obligation. As we grew up on a farm, we always had livestock, so there were chores to do 7 days a week, twice a day. So getting away from work was not an easy thing to do. You couple that with being heavily structured and in a lot of work. It felt like somewhat of an obligation most days to be somewhere and do something. And at first I was a little bit resentful maybe that the childhood wasn't as fun as what I saw most. But as I look back, it gave me a lot of structure. It gave me a lot of, I learned to have faith. And when I talk about it gave me strength both from a faith standpoint and it gave me strength from a physical standpoint. As I look back, we never really had organized sports when we were really little. We didn't really have team sports or team competitions until we were like in middle school. And when I entered the stage of sports, I was a little bit raw with talent, but I had a lot of strength. When you grow up on a farm, you a lot of times are doing a lot of lifting. And in my case, my brothers and I and our neighbors, we kind of had these seasonal, I'll call them seasonal workouts, where in the summertime it was baling hay. And you were on a flat wagon behind a tractor and a baler, and sometimes the fields weren't real level. You may have been on a hill, and you were lifting 80-pound bales, and you'd put 180-pound bales on a load of hay, and you'd do 10 to 12 loads a day. So you'd be lifting 80 pounds, anywhere from 1 feet high to 7 feet high, 1,000 times a day. So when I got into athletics is in middle school, I found that I was stronger than most kids, and I was flexible. I could jump, I could throw, I could. I had a lot of raw talent. So growing up, I learned that it was a lot of hard work, but it gave me strength both from a faith standpoint and a physical standpoint. And it also gave me a lot of responsibility. I vividly remember when I was 13 or 14 years old, taking a load of wheat to the elevator down a paved road, dropping it off, unloading it, the wheat from the wagon, and driving to my Little League All-Star game and playing a game and driving home.
You driving.
Me driving.
At 13.
At 13 or 14. So it was a life that I learned responsibility quickly. I learned strength quickly. Expectations seemed high. I think my mother and father both wanted the best for us, and they set the bar fairly high. And so from my childhood, I would say I got strength from both a faith standpoint and a physical strength standpoint.
Yeah, it's almost like it was not forced on you, but you didn't have a choice to have that mindset and that work ethic. It was that, or that was the only way that you guys knew.
Yeah, it really was. And I guess the other seasonal workout for me was in the winter. I mean, our family burned wood for heat, so our winter times were filled with going to the woods, cutting down trees, chopping wood, throwing it in a wagon, taking it home, unloading the wagon, stacking it. And so a lot of the physical movements you do in a gym or in on your own today in a structured environment or through watching a YouTube video, we naturally did as kids. And I look back, and I never lifted a weight. I never lifted a dumbbell or a barbell until I got out of high school. It was all natural exercise and just natural strength.
It's like that Rocky IV scene. Rocky's like,
I wouldn't consider myself like Rocky, but it was those types of workouts.
Yeah.
Whether it was a sledgehammer or an axe, throwing a bale of hay 80 pounds over your head. And so my childhood was good. We had a lot of structure, a lot of work, but I had a lot of fun with my brothers and sisters. We played in our free time outdoors. We were big on emulating other people. So we'd go out in the yard, and if we played, we'd throw passes and catch sideline catches. We'd emulate swings like Reggie Jackson or George Brett or some of the famous baseball players back in the day, and we'd hit ground balls and turn double plays, and so it was a very natural, innocent, wholesome kind of life as a kid.
Yeah. So then you take that, just that childhood, the kind of the 8, 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, then you start getting into organized sports and in high school, and you're having to start coupling that work that you're doing every day with going to school and then going to practice, organized practice and stuff. It's almost like you were already made for it. It was like no big deal at that point because you were already used to that work ethic. It was already ingrained in your head that that's just how you're supposed to work that hard all the time. Like you said earlier, that it almost seemed weird that if you did have some free time. Yeah.
Our lives were very scheduled, and I've, when I look at myself now, I just yearn some days for that freedom to not be scheduled. But you're right. Every morning it was, you wake up to an alarm clock, you go do your chores, you take a shower, you go to school, you go to practice, you come home, you do your homework, and you start your day all over again. And so that routine and that structure was kind of a natural reoccurrence for us. And I think it helps when you get it helps you when you're in your job or in your studies when you get on your own. But at the time, there were certain times where you just wanted to get away from it. The downside is that you couldn't really get away from it, and have true discovery of yourself. So it was almost as if your life was so scheduled that you really didn't have time for self-discovery. It seemed like it was structured for you. And as I got older, I found that I needed that freedom to be.
So do you think that self-discovery and kind of exploring your own mind kind of started then once you started getting older and more mature and into high school and kind of those years?
Yeah, it did. One of the best things that ever happened to me was when I was about 14. I met someone that truly understood who I was, and it happens to be your mother. That's really when we started our relationship. I think we were both in a spot where we were looking for someone to understand us, and at that time in our lives, it was the right thing that we ran into each other. So she's been a huge part of my success and my self-discovery and allowing me to be who I am. So as we go through 9th grade, 10th grade comes along, and like you and Matt and Joe and Nicole, who played sports, it became a big part of my life. Being a sports guy in a small town where you're excelling is, there's no better feeling. I was really fortunate. When I was a sophomore, our high school coach, whose name is Don Smesnick, approached me and said, "Hey, and a lot of my friends back then called me Jimmy." He said, I was walking in the hallway, and he said, "Jimmy Ruhlman, I want to see you in my office at 2:00. And I said, "Well, I've got class." He goes, "I got you a pass." So I go into his office, and he said, I want you to move up to varsity." And I loved JV football. I loved being with my friends. It was that comfort zone that I just loved. There was a mentality in me that when I lined up across from somebody, that they weren't going to bring me down. And so I loved that success. I loved that feeling of being successful. I can't think of another word right now, and so I told him I really didn't want to. And this coach played for Woody Hayes at Ohio State, and he was a bit intimidating to me. I knew of he was a very successful coach, very structured, very disciplined, and I could tell he was disappointed. And he almost said it in a way that it wasn't an option. And he says, "I know you're good enough to play up here. I'll see you at practice tonight." So I show up at practice in my JV stuff that's just hand-me-downs from varsity. It's all too big, and he looks at me and he says, "You need some new gear." And so go through practices the first few days, and at the varsity level, it's much different than at the JV level. And he was trying to help me and coach me through things. And I remember vividly one day after practice, or I didn't have the greatest of practices, and he came up to me and he said, I just want you to know that I am getting after you because of the way you're playing the game right now, not because of who you are." He said, "I love who you are. I'm just trying to make you a better football player." And that statement at that time in my life was impactful. He was able to separate the game from the person. And after that moment, I just felt like no one could stop me. And I feel that way today. I have this mentality that no one person or no group of people is ever going to bring me down. Every time I lined up as a tailback, I'd look at that linebacker across the line of scrimmage, and I was bound and determined that he wasn't going to bring me down, the safety wasn't going to bring me down, and the corner wasn't going to chase me down. Now, did it happen? Yeah, it happened almost on every play because you don't score on every play. But, I mean, there were some times where I knew the guy across on the other side of the line of scrimmage was faster than me, and I would just run him over. I had this mentality that I was not going to be stopped. And so I think that experience gave me confidence. It gave me the knowledge to know that I could be something better than even maybe what I thought. So when you look at childhood, and I had strength in both faith and physical ability, I had your mom who was a shoulder to cry on or lean on throughout my whole, well, even through today. And then I had a coach who really, really understood me and understood my talent, and that kind of propelled me to the next level of my life.
Yeah, he kind of helped you to not identify as being an athlete, but as identifying as being Jim Ruhlman instead. That was the first time you were exposed to separating the two.
It really was. He was an amazing coach, and I think he's still alive today, and I think I'm going to try to look him up. I think he's probably in his 90s now, but there were a lot of kids that thought he was tough to play for, but I just I wanted to do everything in my ability to do what I could for him, because he was always in my corner.
So then growing up, so all these experiences, is this when you started to think that you wanted more out of this life, that you wanted to get out of this small town and kind of start to take what you've learned already and had the successes that you've had already in high school, and then start taking that into the business world and start to really succeed at a different sport, really, in business or life, whatever it may be, whatever your mindset was? Is this the time period that started to click in your brain, or has it not even crossed your mind yet?
I love the small town. I mean, when you're a small town success on a football field, the old saying, everybody knows your name in every place you go. And so that feeling of importance was huge for me. And, I think it's a feeling that a lot of high school athletes kind of take for granted when they're going through sports, and then when they're out of it, it takes a very long time to find the replacement, that gives you that adrenaline and that high. So I liked the small town. I really wasn't looking to leave the small town. My father was a construction worker, and I had thoughts of being a construction worker, but my mother strongly encouraged. It's kind of like Coach Smesnik. I'm really encouraging you, and by the way, you don't have a choice, to go to college. And so I did, and I loved college. When you grow up in a small town, it seems like everybody's the same. It's the same. Where I grew up, everyone was white. Everybody was blue collar. Everybody either farmed, worked in an automobile factory, or worked in construction. And so the comfort level of being around people was very comfortable for me. And so when you go to college, and even at a smaller school like Saginaw Valley, which really wasn't that far away, the diversity of students and the diversity of that lifestyle was good for me. I learned a lot. I loved college. While I was going to college, I got the opportunity to intern at Michigan Sugar Company, and it was another one of those things where, I worked a work-study job. I took classes all day, and then I worked at Michigan Sugar at 5 o'clock in the morning. So my routine, again, a very strict routine was, and sometimes I'd stay up late as college kids do, but there was always a routine. It was get up, I always stopped at this little restaurant called Little Chef, which was right next to our office. And this old lady named Shirley would always have my black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, and a piece of toast ready for me at 5:15. And by 5:45, I was at work. And I'd give her my $2.50 for breakfast. Actually, I gave her a $5 bill, $2.50 for her, $2.50 for breakfast, and I was on my way. So work in the morning, go to class, do work study, do my homework, and that was kind of the routine. So routine's always been part of my life, and it started very early in life. But the college life and the experience of college and the diversity of students and the opportunities that it presented was awesome for me, and great advice by my mother.
So it sounds like that it was good that you got out of your comfort zone, but was there at going out into that uncomfortable situation of not knowing anyone, a little more diversity, do you have any, what was that transition like? Were you able to relate to people right away? Were you going up and talking to people, or did you kind of have maybe some insecurities or struggles kind of working through that, or did it really just come natural because you started building more confidence towards the end of high school? Or
Yeah, I mean, going into college, I was pretty confident in myself. The structure that I had growing up was good for me. Not that I think that freshman year of college where you're trying to manage social life and studies and grades and so forth is a bit of a challenge. So I'm not saying I killed it grade-wise my first year. But I wasn't uncomfortable at college. I was still pretty confident, and I felt like I belonged there. Maybe if I'd have gone to a much larger school, I would have felt differently. But at Saginaw Valley, where there were other farm kids there, other rural America kids, combined with some folks from the Detroit area, I think we meshed pretty well.
Yeah. So then you're interning at Michigan Sugar, where you're still working now. Nowadays, that's unheard of to start as an intern and then work for the same company for 30-something years.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, when you're interning, you just came out of the phase in high school that you were kind of on top of the world. Everyone knows your name type of person. Are you thinking about being successful at this point? That I want to be the executive vice president one day. I want to be the CEO of this company. Or are you just kind of going with the flow? This is a good job right now. I'm making more money than I had in the past. I'm living pretty good right now. Is that where you were thinking, or was it?
Yeah, that was kind of where I was at. I mean, when you're 20 years old, I think I was 20 years old when I started at Michigan Sugar. It was a great culture. I mean, it was an accepting culture. I felt comfortable there too. But I really wasn't thinking that far ahead at that time. I was just at that point in my career, in all honesty, it was a job. It was a resume builder. It was a way to get experience. I loved the culture there. I didn't know if there was a fit long term, and so yeah, during college, it felt like another job.
So when did that flip then? Or did it just kind of naturally, because you started moving up in the company, did it just start naturally happening? You started to excel and people started noticing? Did that ever click in your mind at a younger age that you had higher aspirations? You started looking at Maggie, I want that car, or I want that big house one day, or did that ever click, or no? Or was it just, It was all just happening in it?
I think both, really, David. I think, when I used to coach, youth football, it was that mantra, that mentality of being better today than you were yesterday, and that's kind of the way I approached work. I think over time I proved myself. Over time, I felt like I was advancing and getting experience as a professional. And I think it was when I was 29 years old, 28 or 29, my manager of our IT department at Michigan Sugar Company left. And I was given the opportunity to lead our IT group at age 29. And I look back and I was pretty young to do that, yet our group was young. And so I think at that point, around 29 or 30, is when I finally felt a little bit out of my comfort zone. I wanted to be a good leader. I have always been able to connect with people. But it was at that point in my career. I was young. I came from a small town. And the other department heads and officers of that company they just felt more affluent. It just felt like I didn't quite measure up. And so it was at that point in my life where I think I kind of felt like, do I really measure up here or not?
That had to be just a weird feeling after. You don't know how to handle a feeling like that after growing up with nothing but successes.
Yeah. And, and in all honesty, it was, I would get through stages of it, and it's all that, that old saying, you don't grow until you get out of your comfort zone. And I would say through ages 30 to 50, there were certain times in my life where I was always out of my comfort zone. It kind of went in streaks where you'd see successes, you'd reach a certain threshold, and you'd just be able to breathe for a bit, and then there was another challenge or there was another opportunity. And, as I look back, as I was going through all of it, and trying to be a husband and a father and in advance in my career, there was a time where I got lost. I found myself in a spot where I was always chasing the next thing, and it hurt me. I made some bad decisions. I wasn't present with my wife and with my family, and I fell into this pretty dark zone where I couldn't really figure out who I was and who I was supposed to be, because it felt like there was always this opportunity that I needed to go after, yet I wasn't content. and I still kind of struggle with it today, because I know when you're uncomfortable, that's a source for growth. But if you let uncomfortable be your norm, it'll catch up with you. You'll at least it did for me. And I got into this dark spot where I didn't know who I was supposed to be. I didn't know if I was supposed to be this top level executive, and I didn't know how to be that and be a great father and a great husband. So there was a period of time in my life where I just didn't know how to handle it. And I made some bad decisions. I made some wrong decisions. I've come out of that now. But I think when you go through life and you're looking for that balance, challenge is great. Being uncomfortable is great. But being uncomfortable all the time is not necessarily a prescription that I would recommend. It's just it consumed me. It captured me, and I had to find a way to get out of it.
What was that way? What did you start doing stuff like taking a walk to clear your head, or did you start just sitting down and watching a game? Because I struggle with that now, where I'll be sitting down trying to watch a Michigan game, and I'm thinking about work, or I'm thinking about the podcast, and it's hard for me to turn my brain off sometimes because I just want to go, and that's a worry of mine, that I'll get burnt out eventually, or start losing what's really important, or what kind of the real goal is, not just the fancy house and a nice car. So
Yeah.
is that it, just try just being conscious of it, I
Yeah,
guess?
yeah, it's consciousness. For me, it was I learned I wasn't taking care of myself.
Mentally or physically or
Both. I didn't take time to do physical exercise. I was just always busy, and especially when you guys were at home. We were either coaching, going to games, eating on the fly, working a lot of hours, and I just didn't take time for myself. And that's, if there's one of the advices that I would give anyone, is to take time for yourself. Take time to exercise, eat right, clear your head. I'm the same way with you. Sometimes I come home from work and I flip on the TV and I don't even watch the game, but it's just enough where I'm not consumed with something. It takes my mind off of whatever's stuck in my head for a little bit of time. So, and admittedly, through some of these struggles, when I got into this dark spot, I actually, went to some counseling, and and I got stuck with, this thought of inadequacy and always trying to get to that next level. And I finally, I was in one of the sessions with a counselor, and it just wasn't working. And I had read this, I had been referred to a hypnotherapist by someone, and I said, I'm going to try that once. And I did, and I went to 2 sessions, and this guy, and it sounds hokey and it sounds unreal, but this guy can really dig deep into what's really at your core. And he in 2 sessions, in 2 hours, changed my life. He basically, what it was is, he taught me to love myself. He taught me to forgive everything I'd ever done. He got me into this place where I didn't have to be ashamed of who I was, or in that I didn't have to feel guilty about anything that I'd done in my past. So it was funny because I took those 2 hypnotherapy sessions, and I go back to my counselor, and he's talking to me, and he goes, "What's up with you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You're different." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're completely relaxed. You're completely calm. You have not a worry in the world. What's going on?" And I told him. And I said, I can look in the mirror, and I can look at myself, and I can love myself. I can love who I am. I don't have to be anything different than who I am. God made me uniquely different than anyone else, just like he made you. And that understanding of knowing that you don't have to be anyone but yourself, and that God made you uniquely different on purpose, it was a game changer for me. And so that was really the turning point. And now I can carry on and be that person that I'm comfortable with. I can look myself in the mirror every day and not have to think I need to be something more. I always felt like there was something missing in me. There was like this hole inside of me. And I've learned that filling that hole is not something that can be filled from the outside. It's that light, and that candle inside of you is fueled by something that's not just an external factor. Yeah, you have to take in, energy and nutrition and everything else to take care of yourself. But that for me, the secret to contentment is self-love. And once I got that, I feel so much better about myself. I feel like I can carry on with my life in a very confident, comfortable way. I still go at it hard every day. I still have goals. I still have aspirations. I still love to be recognized, but I don't have this feeling that I have to be something different than who I really am.
And that person that you are, or that someone else has, that confidence in themselves. We talked about this the other night, and that's a good segue. Is that you know who you are. You know that you are confident in yourself. You want to go after it every day, not to the point where you're burning yourself out, but to the point where you know that you can accomplish things, accomplish goals, go into a meeting and run that meeting. And it's like the word ego and prestige are the ones that always stick out to me. Like, ego is always used as a negative. If someone's got an ego, they're usually an asshole to other people because they're just this overly confident dick. But if you can use ego, knowing yourself, knowing maybe you have a little bit, I have that confidence, that ego maybe, but if you can harness it and tell yourself and look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm the fucking man, I'm going in there, I can do, I'm built for this, God made me for this. No one else, he made me unique, he gave me this skill for a reason. I'm going to use it as a superpower rather than being a dick about it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because one of the other things that I ran across in my life was, this notion, and we can talk a little bit more about it later, is this notion that you're really truly meant to shine. And so, and God gave all of us talents that he wants to utilize to our best of our abilities. And the funny thing is that sometimes when you do that and you're confident, and whether it's prestige or power or confidence, I mean, you can put any word on it that you want, but it's funny because some people will, if someone's on your team and you're confident and you're leading that team, they're right there with you. But some people view that confidence and that strength as cockiness, and there are a lot of people who are jealous of it, and there are people that will try to tear you down because they don't want you to be too good, or they'll tear you down so they can look as good as you are. And that's a warning that I will give young professionals as they become more and more successful, is some people will look at you and view you as having it easy, or things come easy for them, or they think they're all that. Well, when you put the work in and you're confident and you love yourself and you're doing all the right things in the right way, you have a right to be confident and you have a right to feel good about yourself. And if they don't, I'm sorry, that's your problem, not mine. That sounds hard. It sounds a little bit harsh, but there is no shame in working hard and being successful. None at all. You have to be cognizant of it. I mean, you can't be rude or cruel to people. You always have to be kind and understanding, but you should not allow other people to tear you down.
You use that confidence when you have that kind of, just that confidence, that aura about yourself almost. It's got to help build teams in a company. It's got to be the lead. You're looking at, if I'm a team member and I'm looking at a leader like that, I want to work for that guy. I want to learn from him and I want to do good for him. Is that part of the secret to building a team?
I think it is. I think the real key is you got to live your own life in the right way in order for you, because people can see through things. And so if you're living your life in the right way and you're confident and you're and you're you're pulling people along, they can feel that. The other thing, though, is that I've learned that you can't do things on your own. And quite honestly, you want to be successful with others. To be successful by yourself is probably okay. For me, it's not that way. But I also recognize that when you're building teams, I always need 5-star recruits. And when I'm building teams, that's what I look for. I don't need all 5-star recruits, but managing a team that's quote unquote a farm club in sports terms is exhausting. The amount of attention and the amount of effort it takes to build a team, a fairly large team by yourself is challenging. So when people ask me why I'm successful or how I'm successful building teams, it's because I look for 5-star recruits. And a 5-star recruit can take on a different shape or form in every position that I'm looking for, but you need talent, and you need talent on your team that sees the same direction that you do. And once you have 5-star recruits, your ability to succeed is far greater, and it's quite honestly limitless. When you have 5-star recruits at that middle management level, and they're carrying on the torch that you have lit down to the all levels of the workforce, it's a powerful thing. And it's, for me, that's because people ask me all the time, what's your secret? And I'm not the one that does all the work, but I do recognize talent, and through my upbringing, I just feel that I can connect with people. And if you can connect with the 5-star recruits and the people on the floor, and you can walk up to someone and you can feel that positive energy between you, it's a lot of fun and it's really powerful. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, but that's how I approach my job. That's what's worked for me in the past. I've made plenty of mistakes. I've enjoyed the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. But I think the other thing that plays into my head on my day-to-day stuff is that I had a professor in college. His name was Dr. Cheeks, and he in every class he would say, the worst decision is no decision. And he really encouraged us to say, to make a decision. He said, right or wrong, make the decision. And I try to do that. I try not to. I'm not a guy that overanalyzes. I'm not a guy that tries to have every fact and every detail before I make a decision. Some people call it, a gut feel. Well, those people that say that probably don't know that your gut is very closely connected to your brain. And so sometimes gut feel is a real feel and the right decision. And so I typically make decisions fairly quickly. I need 5-star recruits. I look at myself in the mirror every day and make sure I can look at that person and say, we're good. And it works.
When you're looking to build a team and you know you're needing 5-star recruits, what's standing out to you about a particular person or candidate in an interview, something like that? It's probably not the resume. It's got to be a feeling in the room, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. What are some triggers for you, or that you just know this guy's the real deal, or this gal's the real deal?
I mean, that's it. The real deal. Yeah. They have to be real people. I can tell someone in an interview who's giving me answers that I just want to hear. I can tell fairly quickly if they have a work ethic. I can tell fairly quickly if they're lying to me or not. I can tell fairly quickly whether or not they are just looking for a job versus looking for a place on a winning team. So it's funny because I really don't interview that many people. And I keep using sports analogies, but recognizing five-star talent is usually known before they even walk in the door. You either know them from another place, you know them from an association, you know them from a past experience, and you know who they are. And sometimes you don't, but most of the time you know in the league who the five-star recruits are. So in a business like Michigan Sugar Company, who's an agricultural commodity business, you know the players in the league. You know the players in other companies. You know the players in other sugar companies across the country. You just know who they are. Or you might know other players in agribusiness that are very, very well respected and sharp. And so sometimes you go after them. Sometimes you say, hey, I want to talk to you. And sometimes it's just a lunch where you say, hey, if you ever get have an opportunity or have a notion to change careers, I'd love to have you on my team. So five-star recruits are typically that. You go get them. It's not like you put an ad out there and they come in. Sometimes you're lucky to do that, but on five stars, a lot of times you got to go get them. The funny thing is, not funny thing, but the real thing is that once you have five-star recruits and your team's winning, people want to join your team. They want to come. They want to be part of your team. It's the same when LeBron goes somewhere. He draws players, role players, other five-star recruits, other top talent that wants to be part of a winning team. And so once you've established that foundation of a winning tradition, winning departments, and winning teams, word gets out. I mean, if you got five-star recruits on your team, they're talking to other five-star recruits, and they're saying, what are you guys doing there? And they tell them, and there's this intrigue and this interest, and it's just, it's contagious. People want to be part of winning teams. People want to go places where they feel comfortable. They want to go places where they can be recognized. When you talk about building teams and you read books about management and leadership, there's this push-pull kind of differentiation between it. And we talked about it the other day when we were lifting weights. Is I told you on my exercises, it's always easier when I'm doing push exercises. I can bench press pretty easily. I can, but when I do pull-ups or curls, it's harder. When I do triceps, it's a push exercise and it's easier. And I think it's a mentality more than an exercise in that case. And that pushing is always easier than pulling or leading. And I hate the word accountability. I hate the word, policy and rules. And there's always got to be some of them. But I love, what I like better is the words, this is our direction. This is our goal. I need you to stay in your lane, but your lane is very flexible. Here's the goal, but You choose how to get there. And I think for young talent coming in and people trying to use their own unique talents and skills, it's important that you allow them to use them. Putting somebody in a box is not necessarily the answer. Some people need a lot of direction. Some people don't want much at all. But for me personally, accountability is managing somebody. Leading someone is giving them a goal and giving them the latitude on how to get there. And I'm not saying I've always been more of a leader than a manager, because I think there was a time in my career where I didn't recognize that. But I think managers manage and leaders lead. And I think in today's world, people are looking for leaders and not managers.
Yeah, and leaders are the ones pulling people along, and managers are being pushy and keeping people in those lanes. It's easier. And that's why the majority of managers are probably not great ones, because it's easier to push rather than to pull people along with you. And that's your point with that, right?
It is. Yep.
And yeah, you're right. And it almost feels more. It feels good, like if you're bench pressing or something and you start getting more weight up, but it almost feels better when you're pulling, when you're doing like a bent over row or something. You're pulling and you start seeing that go up, because you know that it's harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's kind of the same. I relate everything to to fitness.
Yeah. I mean, when you're bench pressing and you throw another wheel on the bar, it feels good temporarily, and it gives you maybe that instant gratification. But sometimes when things are a little bit harder, a little more challenging, a little more uncomfortable, the reward feels a little bit better in the end. Yeah.
So we've gone through a ton of stuff that people can relate to and learn from and really grab onto and think about. But if you were to kind of summarize, or if you had one point that you could try to get across to someone that's listening that needs to hear something that is going to inspire them, not motivate them, but to inspire them and maybe give them that a little extra push, what would that one thing be that you would want someone to hear?
I mean, in a sentence, it's find a way to love yourself. And when you guys were kids, we used to watch this movie, Coach Carter, and we watched it several times. And there's a scene in Coach Carter that has a portion of a poem that was written by Marianne Williamson, and the title of the poem is "You Are Meant to Shine." And if you have that clip, I'd share it with your audience. But I guess my message and one of the things that's been most impactful for me is that poem and the phrase in there that says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." And if you're in a state where you're feeling inadequate or not living up to expectations, or you don't think you're good enough, pull that poem out or pull that clip out. It's on YouTube, and I don't know, Dave, if you can share it or not, but if I'm going to leave someone with a thought, it's that. And it goes on to say, we were all meant to shine like children do. And so I'm going to just give you that one as a bit of advice and one as a teaser, because I think it's a powerful, powerful message. I think it's a great poem, and it kind of sums up a lot of what I went through personally. It may not relate to everyone, but it's got a powerful message to it.
And I'm not going to try to add anything onto that. Okay. That's going to be the end of it.
All right. That sounds good.
I think people learned from this. I think people can relate to it. And I know that I've learned a lot more from you lately since we've had conversations like this, and learned a lot throughout life, obviously. So I appreciate it. I love you, man.
All right. Love you too, bud.
Thanks for listening today. Hope you found some value in this episode. If you did find some value in it, do me a favor and just share it with one other person that you think might need to hear this message. Maybe they'll find some value in it too. Whatever the podcast app that you're listening to this on, hit subscribe, whether it's Google Podcasts, Apple's Podcasts, Spotify, or maybe you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe. If you are not already following us on social media, it is at The Empire Mentality on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok. I post some of the videos from past episodes. That's how you can just stay connected. That's also how you know when new episodes are dropping. So follow on there, subscribe on the podcast apps. This is just getting started. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate the support. This is Empire Mentality.